Imagine this. Tensions in the South China Sea escalate, and the Philippines finds itself in a full-blown conflict with China. Now the big question arises, would Israel step in to help? On the surface, it seems unlikely. Israel is deeply entangled in its own challenges in the Middle East. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find that the bond between Israel and the Philippines runs deeper than most realize. The friendship between these two nations isn't just a political alliance, it's rooted in history. Back in 1947, the Philippines was the only Asian country to vote in favor of UN Resolution 181, supporting the creation of the State of Israel. Out of 33 nations that cast their votes in favor, the Philippines stood tall as Israel's ally in Southeast Asia. This bond isn't just symbolic. Filipinos enjoy visa-free access to Israel, a privilege rarely extended to other Asian nations. It's often described as Israel's debt of gratitude to the Philippines, a nod to a time when the Philippines, under President Manuel Quezon, opened its doors to Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi persecution. While other Asian nations hesitated or outright refused, the Philippines provided sanctuary. Contrast this with Malaysia and Indonesia. Both countries with Muslim-majority populations naturally align with Arab nations and maintain no formal diplomatic ties with Israel. In Malaysia, for instance, passports explicitly state they are valid for all countries except Israel. Israeli citizens cannot enter Malaysia without special permission from its Ministry of Home Affairs. This hostility isn't just bureaucratic, it's political. In 2015, Malaysia famously denied visas to 2 Israeli windsurfers and their coach, preventing them from competing in a global championship. Indonesia shares a similar stance, keeping relations with Israel at arm's length. But back to the Philippines. Israel question: if war were to break out, how could Israel assist? Direct military intervention seems unlikely. However, Israel could offer intelligence support, cybersecurity assistance, advanced military technology, or even defensive equipment like missile defense systems. The ties between these two nations are unique, and while Israel might not send troops to the front lines, the bond they've built over decades could still play a crucial role in shaping the outcome of such a conflict. In a bold move, shaking up global trade dynamics, Malaysia and Indonesia have officially launched boycotts against Western brands. Big-name companies, from Unilever to Starbucks, are feeling the heat as consumers in these nations turn away from their products in response to escalating tensions in the Middle East. For Unilever, home to household favorites like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, this boycott is hitting where it hurts, their bottom line. But Malaysia isn't stopping there. The government has banned any ships bound for Israel from loading cargo at its ports. Additionally, Malaysian ports are now off-limits to Israeli-owned or flagged vessels entirely. While Malaysia and Indonesia are taking firm stances, other Southeast Asian nations are treading more carefully, maintaining neutrality to avoid getting entangled in geopolitical tensions. The Philippines, China, and the United States are also caught in a delicate dance of diplomacy and power plays. For Israel, navigating this maze isn't easy. Historically, the Philippines provided shelter to Jewish refugees during dark times, creating a bond of gratitude that still exists today. However, Israel also deeply values its economic relationship with China, a powerhouse trading partner. By 2022, China was not only Israel's third-largest trading partner, but also its primary source of imports, worth a staggering $12 billion. Furthermore, Chinese investments in Israeli tech startups, especially in medical, web technologies, and cybersecurity, have skyrocketed to an impressive $20 billion. So, the million-dollar question is, can Israel afford to jeopardize its booming economic ties with China to stand by the Philippines if conflict erupts in the South China Sea? Before diving into that, let's unpack what's really going on in these disputed waters. The South China Sea is a geopolitical tinderbox, with overlapping territorial claims by China, Taiwan, Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. At the heart of the dispute are resource-rich islands and maritime territories, including the Spratly Islands, Paracel Islands, Scarborough Shoal, and even sections of the Gulf of Tonkin. The waters near Indonesia's Natuna Islands, though geographically on the fringes, are also part of this contentious zone. China entered the island-building game relatively late, but quickly changed the rules. While Vietnam and the Philippines had been constructing small-scale outposts for decades, China arrived with earth-moving machinery and an unyielding agenda. Between 2014 and 2016, China built more artificial islands in the Spratlys and Paracels than any other nation in history, transforming reefs and shoals into sprawling military installations. The stakes are high, and every player in this complex chessboard is calculating their next move carefully. But as tensions rise, one question lingers. When push comes to shove, where will alliances truly lie? And how will nations like Israel navigate these turbulent waters? By 2016, the South China Sea had become one of the world's most contested waters. At the heart of the tension was China, which had begun placing military equipment on one of its artificial islands, a move that set it apart from the actions of other nations in the region. This bold step signaled a new chapter in the long-standing territorial disputes marked by China's infamous Nine-Dash Line, a boundary claim stretching across much of the sea. The roots of this conflict go back decades. In the late 1970s, both the Philippines and Malaysia laid claim to parts of the Spratly Islands. On June 11, 1978, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos issued Presidential Decree No. 1596, declaring the northwestern section of the Spratlys, known as the Calayan Island Group, as part of Philippine territory. Yet despite these claims, the control of the Spratly and Paracel Islands remained largely unchanged throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. China maintains full control over the Paracel Islands, while Vietnam holds the largest portion of the Spratlys, with control over 29 features. The Philippines controls 8, Malaysia holds 5, and China occupies 5 as well. However, tensions began to boil over again in 2011. In February of that year, a Chinese frigate fired shots at Philippine fishing boats. Just a few months later, a confrontation occurred between a Vietnamese oil and gas survey ship and 3 Chinese patrol vessels. These incidents were just the beginning of a series of escalations that would grip the region. In response, the Philippines took China to court, filing a case under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. The arbitration focused on key issues in the South China Sea, including the legality of China's Nine-Dash Line. In 2016, the court delivered a landmark ruling largely in favor of the Philippines, declaring that China's historic claims under the Nine-Dash Line had no legal basis unless they aligned with UNCLOS regulations. Despite the ruling, both China and Taiwan rejected the verdict. The Philippines argued that many features in the South China Sea, such as the majority of the Spratly Islands, are incapable of sustaining human life, and therefore cannot have their own exclusive economic zones or continental shelves. More recently, the waters have become a flashpoint once again. In a particularly alarming incident, Chinese and Philippine Coast Guard vessels collided in the disputed Second Thomas Shoal. The confrontation was intense. Chinese Coast Guard ships blocked and executed dangerous maneuvers against Philippine vessels, leading to 2 minor collisions. Later, water cannons from Chinese ships shattered the windshield of a Philippine supply boat, injuring 4 Filipino crew members. While Chinese officials claimed that the Philippine ships were illegally intruding into their waters, Philippine authorities reported structural damage to their vessels and injuries to their crew. The situation remains fragile, with each new confrontation raising fears of a larger conflict, one that could potentially draw in the United States and its allies. The South China Sea dispute isn't just about rocks and reefs. It's about power, resources, and strategic dominance in one of the world's most vital waterways. And as history has shown, every clash carries the risk of sparking something far more dangerous. The United States has made its stance crystal clear. Under the Mutual Defense Treaty, it is obligated to defend the Philippines if Filipino forces, ships, or aircraft come under armed attack, including in the volatile waters of the South China Sea. But what happens if tensions escalate into an all-out war involving the Philippines, the US, and China? Would Israel, one of America's closest allies, step in to assist the Philippines? And more importantly, does Israel have the military strength to challenge a global powerhouse like China? Let's break it down. China commands an overwhelming air force with over 1,000 third-generation fighter jets, more than the combined total of such aircraft across all European nations. On top of that, they boast their own fourth-generation stealth fighter, the J-20. Israel, while significantly smaller, isn't without its strengths. The Israeli Air Force possesses over 200 third-generation fighters and an impressive fleet of 25 advanced F-35 stealth fighters. Both nations are nuclear-armed, adding a chilling layer to any potential confrontation. China ranks as the world's second most powerful military force, trailing only behind the United States. With a massive standing army, advanced weaponry, and a population nearing 2 billion, their sheer scale is hard to match. Israel, on the other hand, ranks between 20th and 26th among the world's most powerful militaries. Despite its smaller population, Israel's military is known for its technological edge, efficiency, and battlefield expertise. However, in a one-on-one confrontation, Israel would face insurmountable odds against China's colossal war machine. Could Israel defeat China alone? The short answer is no. Israel, despite its advanced military capabilities, cannot take on China alone. But Israel isn't isolated. It has powerful allies, primarily the United States. Together, America, Israel, and a coalition of allied nations could challenge China's dominance. How could Israel support the Philippines? While Israel is unlikely to engage in direct combat with China, it could play a significant supporting role. This support might include diplomatic pressure and international advocacy, intelligence sharing, supplying advanced military equipment and technology. It's worth noting that Israel has already been assisting the Philippines in modernizing its armed forces. This partnership could prove crucial in times of crisis. A hypothetical conflict scenario in 2027. Imagine this: China aggressively pushes its territorial claims to include Second Thomas Shoal, a region just 195 miles from the Philippines. Chinese Marines stage live-fire exercises dangerously close to Philippine troops stationed on the aging BRP Sierra Madre. Misinterpreting the exercise as an attack, Philippine Marines retaliate, causing casualties. In response, Philippine warplanes target and damage a Chinese amphibious landing dock. The conflict escalates rapidly, with China's aircraft carrier Shandong launching airstrikes on Philippine airfields and cruise missiles striking military bases across the archipelago. The United States invokes the Mutual Defense Treaty, mobilizing naval forces, 2 carrier strike groups, and B-1 bombers from Guam to seize Chinese-held Subi Reef. Direct confrontations erupt between US and Chinese forces, an open-ended conflict with no clear path to resolution. At this point, America's allies, Japan, Australia, South Korea, and possibly Israel, are pulled into the fray. On the other side, China's allies rally in support. The conflict spirals beyond the South China Sea, threatening global stability. Would Israel truly sacrifice for the Philippines? Israel's support for the Philippines is likely to manifest in strategic, technological, and diplomatic forms rather than direct military involvement. But alliances have a way of evolving under pressure. In a world where regional skirmishes can rapidly become global crises, the strength of partnerships will be put to the ultimate test. So, do you believe Israel would stand with the Philippines in their time of need? And how far would they go to honor their alliance? Share your thoughts below, and let's keep this conversation going.